How can architecture with disabled hand achieve beauty in architecture? How can one create forms that feel weightless and timeless? How does one architect define and shape the architectural identity of a country? The answer to these questions lie in knowing the life of Abdul Ahed. The story of Abdul Ahed is filled with inspiration, with art, with philosophy, with introspection, but most importantly, with beautiful architecture. He was considered to be an authentic and established architect with a lifetime achievement in the field of architecture. In 1919, as the world recovered from the tumultuous experience of the First World War, a child was born in Hyderabad, Deccan in India, who was named Muhammad Abdul Ahed in the family tradition. He received an unexceptional early education at the local primary and secondary schools, but developed some quite exceptional traits and habits at an early age. Born with a disabled right hand, he began to draw and paint with his left hand in a sketchbook at the tender age of 5 or 6 years. Perhaps because he was unable to participate in the games and the other children played, with a keen eye and the tireless support and encouragement of his mother, a strong woman who was determined not to let him feel sorry for himself. He more than compensated for his physical disability at quick, spontaneous sketching. His sketchbook became a constant companion for the rest of his life, a medium through which he explored and captured the infinite, often fleeting, variety and richness of his world. Abdul Ahed's sketchbooks provide a marvelous record of the insatiable curiosity and inexhaustible creative insight that he possessed through his life. He learned to play the harmonium so well that later in life he would regularly play with the most preeminent classical musicians in Pakistan. The rhythmic order that one finds in the mature architectural designs of M.A. Ahed is reminiscent of a similar fusion of architecture and music that is found in the work of the great American architect Louis Kahn, the latter also having been a passionate musician. His family wanted him to enter the woodworking business like his younger brother, but quite understandably, the young Abdul Ahed wished to study the fine arts after completing his secondary schooling in 1940. On the pragmatic advice of his elder brother, Dr. Rab, who has raised him after the untimely death of their father, when Abdul Ahed was just 8 years old, he opted to study architecture at the Sir J.J. School of Arts in Bombay. The admissions officer at the school tried his best to discourage Abdul Ahed from taking the entrance test due to his disabled hand.
ये आदमी स्कल्पटिंग करता था, स्कल्पचर, कार्विंग करता था. यानी आप सोच भी नहीं सकेंगे. इनको ये आर्किटेक्चर पढ़ने गए तो इनसे कहा कि टी स्क्वायर चलाने के लिए तो 2 हाथ चाहिए होते हैं, तो कहने करके देख लें. फिर ये ड्राइविंग लाइसेंस के लिए गए, उन्होंने कभी गाड़ी चलाने को तो 2 हाथ चाहिए होते हैं, कहने के टेस्ट कर लें वो भी. तो उन्होंने अपनी ज़िंदगी में कोई शौक़, कोई रोका नहीं अपना.
But the young man's determination and artistic aptitude was such that he not only passed the competitive exam, but excelled at it. Thereafter, his ability to study architecture was never questioned. While he was enormously successful in architecture, both at school and later in practice, the fine arts remained his foremost passion, as he would candidly confess throughout his life. His experience of studying architecture in an art school within a cosmopolitan environment was tremendously enriching in terms of his creative and intellectual development. His circle of friends had diverse interests, including the fine arts, performing arts, literature, music, and philosophy. Like the young Alvar Aalto, who would later become the most preeminent Finnish modern architect at the Helsinki Polytechnic, Abdul Ahed at the JJ School became involved in numerous dramatic productions, designing props and painting backdrops. In addition, his caricatures were featured regularly in the local newspapers. The diverse and prolific creativity that M.A. Ahed demonstrated at the JJ School was to be a mere precursor to the immense talent that he was exhibit as an architect and painter in the years to come. Upon completing the first 3 years of his architectural studies in Bombay in 1943, M.A. Ahed returned to his native Hyderabad for the next 5 years to work in the town planning department and at the private practice of M. Fayazuddin, then the most reputed architect in Hyderabad. Here in 1947, he married Shahryar Banu Haqqani, the educated niece of his employer, with whom he would have 2 sons, Javed and Ijaz. Ijaz then becoming another renowned architect of Pakistan.
I am his son, but I hardly knew him. और मेरे उनके लास्ट लाइफ के 15-20 साल जो है बस मेरी उनकी बहुत दोस्ती थी और मैंने सोचा कि ये चीज़ जो है ना बहुत वैल्यूबल चीज़ है और ऐसे इंसान को बहुत कम देखा है। तो मैं एज अ प्रोफेशनल बात करूँगा, नॉट एज अ सन, क्योंकि मुझे ये देखा है मैंने कि उनकी जो वैल्यू सिस्टम्स थी या उनके ये लोग ऐसे लोग दुनिया में बहुत कम आए हैं और हमारे बरसग़ीर में तो और भी कम आए हैं। पाकिस्तान के लिए ये लोग बहुत अजीम लोग थे। अहद साहब जो है वो पहले वो उनका पहला लव तो आर्ट ही था, आर्किटेक्चर में नहीं था। तो वो अपनी लाइफ में उन्होंने ये 6 साल की उम्र में वो वाटर कलर्स और ऑयल्स कर रहे थे। ये ऐसी चीज़ें हैं जो लोगों को शायद कहानियों के थ्रू बताया जाए या इंसिडेंट्स या उनके आदात की तरफ से, ताकि ये पता लगे कि सिर्फ आर्टिस्ट नहीं, इंसान क्या था जिसने दुनिया को कंट्रीब्यूट किया है।
The desire to complete the remaining 2 years of his architectural education urged him, however, to travel a year later by ocean liner to England, where he obtained a diploma in architecture from the Leicester College of Arts and Architecture in London in 1951.
ये स्कूल ऑफ आर्ट्स पढ़ के तकरीबन ख़त्म किया उन्होंने, तो उनको उनके प्रोफेसर ने कहा, अरे मियाँ आर्टिस्ट आदमी ना कभी कभी भूखा भी रहता है, तो कोई प्रोफेशन भी ले लो। तो उन्होंने कहा अच्छा क्या करें, अकेले आर्किटेक्चर ले लेते हैं। तो वो फिर उस बेसिस पे इंग्लैंड गए और फिर पढ़ के आए।
At 32, Ahed was several years older than the rest of his classmates at Leicester and leaps and bounds ahead of them in terms of his conceptual design capabilities as well as his presentation skills and techniques. As a result, he excelled at school and assumed the role of a mentor in the studio, guiding fellow students in their design projects. His studio work from this period demonstrates a remarkable level of maturity and vision for a young architect. It embodies the promise of Ahed's architectural designs in Pakistan in the years to come. During the course of his studies in England, Ahed worked for the Leicester County Council and also became associated with an architectural firm, Grenfell Baines. He subsequently became an associate member of the Royal Institute of British Architects. The experience of studying and working in England was extraordinarily stimulating for a young man of M.A. Ahed's intellectual and creative abilities. London was then, as now, the cosmopolitan hub of Western culture with innumerable museums, art galleries and theatres. Ahed was eager to absorb all that they had to offer, especially in terms of architecture. When the time came to return to his homeland in 1951, he chose to settle in Pakistan rather than in India. The infant nation had very little infrastructure to speak of, and its institutions needed to be created. For an aspiring young architect, there could not have been a more opportune place or moment to embark upon a professional career. M.A. Ahed settled in Karachi, the nation's first capital and its port city, a city destined to become the country's largest metropolis. He joined the Pakistan Public Works Department under the leadership of Mehdi Ali Mirza, the most preeminent architect of his time, whose work Ahed greatly admired and whom he considered to be the pioneer of Pakistani architecture. The two architects worked as partners on many public and private buildings before the untimely death of Mirza in 1961. At the time, the Pak PWD office was located in a two-room quarter on Jahangir Road. During office hours, the front room served as the office of the PWD, while the Ahed family occupied the rear accommodation. Thereafter, the young wife and two children would have the use of the front room as well. M.A. Ahed remained at the PWD for 14 years, the last 6 years as its chief architect. This position gave him the opportunity to work on the most important prestigious public projects of the period, both in West and East Pakistan, now Bangladesh. Together with Mehdi Ali Mirza, Minu Mistri and Rustamji, M.A. Ahed established the Government School of Architecture in Karachi in 1954. He later headed this institution as principal for 6 years and bears the distinction of being the first in the country to have also enabled women to acquire an architectural education. The first two female architect graduates of the school were in fact nieces of Ahed. As a brilliant lecturer of solid geometry, drawing and construction, Ahed taught and inspired a generation of younger Pakistani architects, some of whom later worked as partners with him or in his private practice, Ahed Associates. M.A. Ahed had a prolific architectural career, both while he worked for the PWD as well as in the private practice. The country was young, and much needed to be done architecturally and otherwise in the public sector. Moreover, there were very few well-qualified professionals in Pakistan at the time. So naturally, M.A. Ahed made his mark on the architectural profession, impressing clients and associates alike with his immense talent.
Ahed साहब आर्टिस्ट थे, अहद साहब आर्किटेक्ट थे, अहद साहब को म्यूज़िशियन थे और अहद साहब 7 ज़बानें बोलते थे. इनको इतनी ज़बानें आती थीं, ये पोइट्री आती थी इनको, मतलब फ़ारसी, अरबिक, 7 ज़बानें तो बोलते थे ये हर चीज़ की.
When he established his own practice, Ahed Associates, many of his PWD clients continued to seek his professional services, the most notable of whom was Shujaat Ali Hasni, the then governor of the State Bank of Pakistan. He commissioned Ahed to design the headquarters building of the bank in Islamabad. This became the first major architectural project of Ahed Associates and the one with which M.A. Ahed would be identified the most.
अहद साहब को बढ़ाने वाले ये 1-2-3 दरबारी थे जिन्होंने मिलाया. कौन थे? एक थे शुजात अली हसनी जो स्टेट बैंक के गवर्नर थे. दूसरे थे नवाब मुज़फ़्फ़र अली क़ज़लबाश. ये लोगों ने इनको आगे बढ़ाया, अपने घर बनवाए.
Much can be understood about Ahed's architectural style from the study of very different houses that he designed during the late 1950s and early 1960s. The architect's own house, designed and built by M.A. Ahed in 1960, completely embodies the architect's simple design philosophy regarding house design. In an interview to ARCHI Times, he stated that a house should be simple. It should look like a home and display the taste of its residents. It should be well built because people cannot make investments in houses again and again. Ahed's own house is entirely different in scale and materials from his other architectural work, both domestic and non-domestic, all of which is grand in character. Ahed's house is a wonderfully comprehensive embodiment of the architect's personality, values, and design philosophy. Quiet, even reticent, simple, modest, and frugal. M.A. Ahed was occupied during most of his architectural career with the design of civic and institutional rather than the residential or commercial. In 1964, M.A. Ahed designed the factory and offices of Elite Publishers Limited. The General Post Office complex on I.I. Chandigarh Road in Karachi, which was built from 1966 to 67, is characteristic of the architect's style. The original design consisted of a dramatic compositional play of juxtaposed masses, a horizontal cubic volume surmounted by a dome, placed as a foreground object against twin vertical slabs in the background. M.A. Ahed used the expertise he had gained on his study tour of American medical facilities in 1960 to design the Abbasi Shaheed Hospital in Karachi in 1970. The 200-bed hospital was designed as a major public health facility for the northern districts of Karachi. The most significant example of Ahed's architectural style is the State Bank of Pakistan building in Islamabad, completed in 1970. This was the first major project that Ahed received when he established his private practice, Ahed Associates, in Karachi in 1964. The building has served as the National Assembly of Pakistan as well as the Senate for 17 years, and it has the distinction of being the only post-partition building in the country to be featured on a Pakistan currency note.
My father did the State Bank of Pakistan building in Islamabad, which of course came on the 500 rupee note and whatever. So his influence of Oscar Niemeyer showed a lot into that work, and so he had a great knowledge which helped me settle back into architecture and into life. Although I still wasn't very close to him, but still I was able to. When you have a great person around you, the aura it gets inside you. It gets inside you, and you also want to be that great. Of course, I can never be that great as him, but nevertheless, one always tries.
As with the work of other great architects, an analysis of Ahed's architectural design reveals a thematic unity throughout his career. The design of the State Bank building is a culmination on a grand scale of that of the GPO building in Karachi. In the time-honored tradition of Corbusier and Niemeyer, and even more dramatically than at the GPO building, the design constitutes a rich compositional juxtaposition in which a horizontal, rectilinear, grounded volume serves as a visual podium for the vertical slab and the dome. In 1968, following the return of Yahya Merchant, the architect of the Quaid-e-Azam's Mausoleum in Karachi, to India, M.A. Ahed was appointed honorary consulting architect by the government of Pakistan for the completion of the building together with its gardens. With Ahed's professional expertise, the structure, the 4 inclined walls of which were then under construction, was completed according to the spirit of Yahya Merchant's design. It is not surprising, therefore, that the most important design contribution of M.A. Ahed to the Quaid's Mausoleum is not in terms of his architecture. With its characteristic attention to detail, Ahed designed the chandelier that forms the focal element of the monumental yet simple central domed space of the cenotaph chamber. This chandelier was manufactured in China and gifted by the Muslim Association of the People's Republic of China to the people of Pakistan. Ahed served as a member of the Quaid-e-Azam Memorial Fund Board from 1970 until 1990. In 1971, Ahed served as a jury member on the panel of the International Design Competition for the Regent's Park Mosque and Islamic Center in London. The same year, he was awarded the Sitara-e-Khidmat by the President of Pakistan for his meritorious services to the nation.
My father was a born artist, architect, musician.
M.A. Ahed had a remarkably simple and straightforward architectural philosophy. In an interview to ARCHI, he said, "Architecture is a representation of society. It reflects the collective taste of the people. I think the architecture of Karachi, or you can say Pakistan, reflects the Pakistani taste. You can see for yourself which way society is progressing. That is the way for architecture as well. Do not try to judge the architecture of an area or era independent of its context, because both the architect and the client are part of the same society." He believed that the design of a building should fulfill its purpose comfortably with regard to cultural, climatic, and programmatic requirements, and that such consideration would generate its form. In an interview to ARCHI, he said, "A building is more than just a form. Architecture is not meaningful unless there is some substance to the form. A building has to function, it must fulfill its purpose, If it does not work, then it has like sculpture, not really. M.A. Ahed was receptive to the architectural influence of the modern masters, as well as to those of his renowned contemporaries. Ahed's architecture was particularly inspired by the design philosophy of Frank Lloyd Wright, who has been called the master of modern architecture. Ahed's debt to Wright's design is evident in his sensitivity to scale, to the relationship between building and site, and to the use of materials and technology. Also, as with Wright's work, geometric order and formal composition became the hallmarks of M.A. Ahed's mature architectural style. Like the great Bauhaus architect Mies van der Rohe, Ahed believed in the necessity of architectural form, cladding, and articulation to be built with the materials and technology of their time, in order to express the zeitgeist, spirit of the time. As long as the building works, the covering may change, and it will and must change with time. Ahed himself acknowledged the influence of Niemeyer on his work. This is vividly expressed in Ahed's architectural compositions. The juxtaposition of discrete Platonic and semi-Platonic forms in concrete, each form didactically containing a specific function, and each articulated with a patterned perforated skin of rhythmic textures to achieve climatic responsiveness and visual enrichment. Ahed acknowledged in an interview that color, texture, composition, and form interested me. In architecture as well, I saw these as being very important. However, a building is more than just a form. The architectural designs of Ahed, both institutional and residential, embody tremendous compositional richness, both in terms of massing and surface texture, as well as spatial grandeur. His architectural oeuvre is an eloquent manifestation of a profound understanding of proportional harmony, the laws of structure, and the nature of materials and the drama of space-making. Ahed associates were thus passed on to the second generation, with M.A. Ahed continuing in his capacity as founding and advising partner until his death in November 2001. The practice that was founded by M.A. Ahed is now headed by his son Ijaz Ahed. M.A. Ahed confessed in an interview that painting, not architecture, was his natural calling in life. My first love has always been painting. He had a long and tremendously prolific as well as versatile career as an artist, during which, following in the footsteps of the great Renaissance masters, he practiced all forms of the visual arts as well as music. But as a fine artist, he was primarily a painter. Like Le Corbusier, although Ahed painted throughout his life, he became more well known as an architect. Even during his career as a practicing architect, his typical day at the office would be divided between architectural design with his staff in the studio and painting in solitude in his private office. In fact, it would not be wrong to say that Ahed's architectural articulation has been enriched by his painterly sensitivity, and that his paintings embody a profound sense of architectural space. Unlike the work of Corbusier, Ahed's architectural and painting compositions appear, however, to be quite independent of each other. After retirement from architectural practice in 1977, when he was still in his prime at merely 58 years of age, M.A. Ahed was able to devote himself completely to painting. Although in his youth he had painted primarily with oils, most of his later work was painted in watercolors, more fluidly and spontaneously expressing his subjects, as well as the verve of the artist's hand. His favorite theme became the idyllic rural landscapes of Pakistan, in which he explored the humanity of the country folk going about the daily activities of their lives. The simplicity of the architect's genre is in keeping with the artist's own lifestyle. Seated on a dari, he painted without an easel in the quiet solitude of a room. Perhaps the most notable feature of his paintings is the immense diversity of the subject matter that interested him. as well as the wide variety of graphic media that he employed. His work can be broadly categorized as portraiture, life studies, still life, landscapes, and non-objective compositions. Each category has been explored extensively in oils, pastels, chalk, charcoal, ink, or pencil, although the artist's favorite medium was undoubtedly watercolor. This graphic medium is the oldest known to man for its artistic expression. Although perhaps the most difficult to master for the facile watercolorist who has learned to control the medium's inherent unpredictability as well as its irreversibility, the expressive possibilities are infinite due to the inherently transparent luminosity of the color washes on the paper. The artist's characteristic approach to the subject, however, was the medium, is spontaneous and immediate. Some works are more formal and are finished, while others are quick and sketchy. Ahed said in an interview, "Before I could write, I could draw." He began to maintain a sketchbook at the young age of 8, but the bulk of his earliest work, while still a youngster in Hyderabad, has tragically been lost. Fortunately, some of the drawings and paintings from his days at the JJ school have, however, survived. Although they include still life studies, as well as copies of the European masters, the vast majority consists of portraits of fellow students and acquaintances, mostly finished paintings in watercolor. Portraiture and the study of human figure remained Ahed's favorite genre throughout his life, and he executed these works in all available media. Perhaps portraiture gave him the opportunity to minutely and intimately explore the complexities of human nature at a safe distance and on his own terms, without having to verbally engage his subjects. Given his natural reserve, he would undoubtedly have found this interaction to be difficult, perhaps even tiresome. A notable feature of Ahed's paintings in this regard is the complete absence of self-portraiture. It seems that the painter was always comfortable behind the canvas, never in front of it. Although not a specialist like the Dutch artists, the influence of Frans Hals on Ahed's portraiture is primarily in the selection of ordinary people who are depicted in their everyday environment. There is a complete absence of self-consciousness or formality between subject and painter. Rembrandt's influence on Ahed's art is most noticeable in the portraits of the old men and women that he has painted. The pathos expressed in the wrinkled, grooved faces of these old folk reveals a profound understanding, even empathy, on the part of the artist of the hard, perhaps tragic experiences of their lives. No discourse on Ahed's art can be complete without a discussion of the countless thumbnail sketches he did throughout his life, of family, friends, acquaintances, even strangers. These quick sketches, whether portrait or figure studies executed in ink, pencil, or charcoal, are often more insightful about the personality of the subject than any finished painting could ever be. A large group of these is devoted to the study of his wife in the familiar surroundings of their home during the course of the day. She is spontaneously caught in the domestic activities, often unaware of her husband's penetrating gaze, as when resting or sleeping. For a reticent man with a conventional Muslim upbringing, this was probably the only way that Ahed knew of expressing his love for his lifelong companion. Another sizable group of his sketches, most of which are executed in ballpoint pen, was done while watching television during the later years of his life. A large number of erstwhile well-known faces that have since faded into oblivion peek momentarily from the past as one browses through the discolored pages of the architect's sketchbooks. During the later part of Ahed's life, starting from 1985, There is a notable shift towards landscape painting in watercolor. The human figure continues, however, to appear even here, sometimes distantly but often as the focal element of the composition. The landscapes are sometimes real but often imaginary, or a blend of the two. They are typically inhabited by simple folk, usually accompanied by donkeys, horses, goats, camels, or cattle, who are engaged in their daily activities, their depiction giving the artist the opportunity to continue his exploration of the human body in various postures. There is candor in their faces, and they carry themselves with dignity and poise. The children reveal an innocence that has remained untainted by the experience of life. Often a profound sense of deep, open space is achieved by the placement of natural elements such as vegetation, rocks, human or animal figures in the foreground or middle ground against the background of the distant sky to create a spatially layered composition. Whether incorporating the vista of a verdant grassy field on a mild summer's day, a rocky promontory on a wet stormy night, or a parched desert landscape at midday, and whether populated or not by peoples or animals. These serene or violent landscapes touch the chords of one's soul as they reconnect one to nature in all her moods. For a 6-month period during the 1990s, Ahed experienced a profound sense of imminent death. The paintings that date from this period reveal a deep preoccupation with human mortality, expressed in the form of phantom-like spirits rendered in gloomy tones of somber hues, journeying across the eerie dreamscapes to the realm of the beyond. Whether Ahed's own soul was among these traveling phantoms, one shall never know for sure. Many paintings from 1972 onwards, and especially those that belong to the year 2000, the year before Ahed died, are predominantly highly abstracted or non-objective compositions. In contrast to the morbid paintings of a decade earlier, these watercolor paintings are executed with spontaneous swirling strokes of vibrant colors, exuberantly sprinkled and splashed in a joyous celebration of life. A notable compositional theme of these paintings is the manner in which diagonal elements have been lyrically played off against the orthogonal picture frame, imparting a strong element of dynamism to the composition. Another characteristic is the use of spiraling bursts of color that radiate out from one or more centers, some being vaguely discernible as exuberant floral still life or fiery landscape compositions, the abstraction bordering on non-objectivity. The optimism that these works embody perhaps reflect the sense of fulfillment that Ahed felt towards the end of his life. His had been a life well lived in the pursuit and accomplishment of his artistic and architectural objectives. These compositions form a wonderful finale to his lifelong achievements in the arts. During the pre-television days of the 1950s and 1960s, Karachi enjoyed a lively cafe culture, the most notable venues in the city being Cafe George and Cafe Rex. Here, artists, performers and writers would gather for hours on discussion on the controversial issues of the day. M.A. Ahed was a regular visitor to Cafe Rex, where he spent his evening hours after work.
ये लोग मैं आपको एक चीज़ बताऊं, ये लोग वहाँ रेक्स सिनेमा जो होता था उसके पास एक रेस्टोरेंट होती थी, वहाँ 2:30 बजे के बाद सारे शहर के आर्टिस्ट, म्यूज़िशियन, हमारे जितने बड़े आर्किटेक्ट थे, मेहदी मिर्ज़ा, नकवी सिद्दीकी, सब वहाँ आके बैठते थे। गुलजी भी, गुलजी ने तो मुझे बताया था कि मैं आपके वालिद आके लाइव स्केचिंग करते थे वहाँ बैठ के फुटपाथ पे, चाय आती थी तो वो कहने लगे कि हम उनको घंटों देखते रहते थे। तो इस किस्म की इनकी तो नेचुरल एबिलिटी थी कि ये लाइव बनाते थे हर चीज़।
Sometimes he would talk, but more frequently, being a man of few words like me's, he would sketch his acquaintances and friends. With boundless self-confidence and sheer determination, together with immense natural creative talent, M.A. Ahed heroically overcame the tremendous hardships of his physical disability. Ahed's numerous buildings in the major cities of Pakistan and Bangladesh, and his paintings, both at the National Gallery in Islamabad and in countless private collections around the world, are major artistic contributions to the cultural heritage of Pakistan. His diverse and profound interest, knowledge and creative ability in the fine arts, architecture, music, literature, philosophy, and languages is in the tradition of the great literary giant Khusro. His enormous accomplishments, anchored in a deeply spiritual morality and a self effacing humility, bear witness to the Renaissance man that Muhammad Abdul Ahed truly was, and will always be remembered in history for his remarkable contribution for art and architecture.